Welcome to the wonder that is Singapore. This city-state at the southern tip of the Malaya Peninsula, in between Indonesia and Malaysia, where the straits become the ideal place for sailing. The 19th edition of the world-known event opens today and is hosted in the exceptionally prepared 1 degree 15 marina. And so from early on, the eager to compete sailors descended on the marina and started preparing their boats for the coastal race scheduled first, and the crossing to Batam in Indonesia, which would follow. The 3 days this event will last are full with exciting races. By 10 a.m, the first teams were already out in the water, busy training and trimming their sails before the race would begin. The weather is a bit tricky since today's coastal race is very close to shore, and with the wind blowing through the tall buildings, the gusts were ranging between 7 and 16 knots. The coastal race finally started, on schedule at 11. The IRC A class were the first to begin, with the rest of the classes following. The boats were required to sail along the coast of Singapore, starting from the west side and the island of Sentosa to the east side, close to the naval base. All these boats would be crossing in front of both some of the natural beauty spots as well as the stunning city skyline that Singapore presents to athletes and spectators alike. A unique combination of big skyscrapers in the midst of green parks, or surrounded by these tall trees so typical of Asian landscapes. The crews taking part in the Straits race were enjoying every minute of this beautiful sunny and windy day, with the gusts easily reaching up to 16 knots. And before too long, the first boats were crossing the finish line, and from there, they sailed towards the picturesque island of Batam and the Nong Sa Point Marina and Resort. This stunning resort will host the athletes for the next 2 days. There will be 2 inshore races, taking place right in front of the resort. But let's hear from Yacht Relations Manager of 1 Degree Marina Club, Lisa Juris, a few more words about today's race.
19th year of the Singapore Straits Regatta. We have 1 event, 2 sides of the straits, and 4 social events. So today we had a really good roundup. We had 21 boats today that sailed from Singapore here to Nong Sa Point Marina. And it was fantastic sailing. We had 10 to 15 knots today. Everybody's happy. They got sunburns, they had wind on their face. They couldn't be happier. We have more events to come, and the results will be out soon for today and going forward.
After the first day of races, the Singaporean boat, Windseeker, leads in the IRC A class, while in the IRC B, the top spot belongs to Wakatiri. And Melissa 3 is ahead in the PY class. There are also 2 One Design classes competing in Singapore. Here, it's SMU MAD leading in the Plateau 25 class, while in the J24 boats, it is Angel that's currently first. An especially exciting schedule awaits the sailors for the second day. There'll be 2 inshore races taking place right in front of the Nong Sa Resort. These battles are expected to be fierce. A beautiful start to the second day of the 19th Straits Regatta in Indonesia and the Nong Sa Point Resort and Marina, where sailors were staying the night after the long coastal race of the first day. And everybody was looking forward to the inshore races scheduled for today. Yet the weather conditions prevalent in the course area would be very demanding. With winds maxing at 18 knots and the strong current of the straits, things would not be that easy for the sailors. So at 10 a.m, the first race started, with the IRC A boats going first. And indeed, they had a blast with the near-ideal conditions in Batam today. Pretty soon, every class had crossed the starting line, and before too long, the first boats were already rounding the weather mark. The boats were then hoisting their spinnakers for one truly spectacular downward leg, complete with some really big waves and impressive speeds achieved from most of the boats competing here. Yet this was not very easy for the crews. This breezy weather demands specific skills and full control of the boat from the crew on board. Not everyone could respond to this situation, however. The strong currents and some quite choppy waves did cause troubles to a good few boats. Still, the race carried on, and soon the first boats were crossing the finish line. Both races scheduled were completed as planned. Owners, sailors and spectators enjoyed every exhilarating minute. But let's hear a few words from the 2 leaders in IRC A and B classes.
This is the 19th Singapore Straits Regatta, and Shun Fong has done 19 regattas. So we've been around a long time.
This is the last regatta for the Sir Thomas Lytton Trophy. So there are 3 regattas. And the boat that does well in these three regattas, which are the Raja Moda, King's Cup and the Straits Regatta, and ends with the Straits, wins the Sir Thomas Lipton's Trophy.
Today was a very special day. It was beautiful weather, lovely conditions for sailing. The waves were up around about 1 metre and we had up to 15-16 knots of breeze. So ideal conditions, bit of a tidal stream running through the fleet, running down the course, which made it interesting.
After 3 races in total, there have been ups and downs at the rankings, and the fun here in Indonesia at the 19th Straits Regatta continues. Later in the afternoon, the teams taking part in the regatta also had to build their very own toy boat and compete against each other just for sheer fun. A great way to wind down after a very demanding day. A coastal race along the shores of Batam will be the main event of the third day, and then the boats will be returning to Singapore for the very last day of racing. Second day's inshore races were the highlights of the regatta so far. And the day closed with the fun races organised at the pool of the Nongsa Point Resort and Marina. But before the boats could make their way back to Singapore, another inshore and coastal race was scheduled for this, the third day. Today, at the 19th Straits Regatta, was the last day of the athletes' exciting stay at the Batam Island. Everything started on time, with conditions once again being excellent for racing. The breeze of up to 18 knots and some really big waves made the last race to take place in Batam one to remember. All teams gave it their best today, in pursuit of a good result. With the wind much more stable, performance in today's races depend primarily on building up boat speed, as well as in handling. Whereas in the Singapore races tomorrow, the wind is expected to be quite shifty. With unexpected gusts, things certainly become all the more challenging for sailors. Although the students of Singapore Management University are not too worried. The institution has a total of 5 boats competing at this regatta. But strength lies not just in numbers. An exceptional sailing component within the university's sports activities leads to the very best students being picked to race in the regatta each year, representing the university. And the last 2 days are a testament to the fact that their abilities and performance are at least equal to those of professional crews competing here. Meanwhile, back in Singapore, the SB20 and Trimarans completed a total of 5 inshore races today. These categories included boats that achieve quite impressive speeds, and the Trimarans especially offer a great spectacle when their starboard hull flies over the water. The SB20s were also involved in some of the fiercest battles of the Straits Regatta so far. At the end of day 3, all categories have completed 5 races, and the leaders have begun to emerge more clearly. Even those 2 new categories, which started competing today, managed to quickly reach the same number of races as the other boats. Of course, the race course is shorter for those smaller boats, and thus also the duration of the races themselves. Their smaller size is also the reason they could not participate in the crossing to Batam Island earlier in the regatta. On the final day of the 19th Singapore Straits Regatta, the 2 races scheduled are both expected to form a truly exciting climax to this event. A wildly successful 19th Straits Regatta ends today, here where it started at the 1°15 Marina. Gusty and breezy weather prevailed on this 4th and last day of the event, so participating sailors needed to give it their all. The first categories to start racing were the IRC A and B, and the PY classes. They were followed by the 1 design categories, and then the really fast SB20 boats. And last but not least, the even faster trimaran boats. Today's schedule called for a coastal race along the shore of Singapore, with all classes starting out in front of the Approach Bay area, then heading upwind towards the east coast of Singapore and the SF Yacht Club. From there, the second coastal race would commence, which would essentially involve boats returning back to Approach Bay where they started. The long upwind leg would be more like a drag race. Not much manoeuvring would be required. This time, boat speed would be the most crucial factor in winning the race. When strong winds are the order of the day, the effort put together by the crew has not only to do with technique, it is also about hiking hard, keeping the boat as flat as possible. The job of the skipper, on the other hand, becomes quite demanding. They need to still be taking all advantage of all the wind shifts and gusts in order to make their boats sail even faster. Soon, all classes reached the finish line, and after a brief wait, the downwind leg began in earnest. But now speeds were increasing dramatically. All spinnakers were hoisted and everyone was having a blast sailing in these conditions, aiming to return to Approach Bay as fast as was possible. Though the wind was not very consistent, partly because of those high-rise buildings and skyscrapers present in this part of the Singaporean coast, nonetheless the battles were fierce. Especially those between the SB-20s. These boats were getting so close to each other for the most part of the race that the tension got palpable for spectators and sailors alike. This offered some amazing moments in this competition. Another Straits Regatta came to an end, with nearly all races completed with breezy conditions and every day being different and exciting. This event in Singapore is one of the most important dates in the sailing calendar for Southeast Asia particularly, not least as it forms the last stop of the Sir Thomas Lipton Trophy, following the Raja Muda International Regatta and the King's Cup. Of those three anchors to the Asian sailing circuit, the Straits Regatta is perhaps, if not the most important, then the most dramatic and exciting. It all ends here, and all the sailors each year really give it all they have. This year too, the regatta had a splendid finale, courtesy of the organisers. The awards ceremony brought together all the athletes and strong memories of these thrilling past 4 days in Singapore and Batam Island. And, of course, you can't have too much of a good thing. Yet another one of those fun races followed the ceremony, and then it was really time to start partying. And on that note, it's goodbye from Singapore. Thanks for being with us.